programme features live coverage of an African safari and may include animal kills and carcasses. Viewer discretion is advised. Good morning. What a disaster. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Dawn Safari here from the northeast corner of South Africa. That is a thorn, and this, dun dun dun, is Safari Live.
Ready.
Standing by.
Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. You are live, you are live.
As I say, it is in fact morning time here, which is when we have the sunrise safari. My name is James Hendry, and it is wonderful to be talking to you here from what is a chilly morning of about 15 degrees Celsius, 59 degrees Fahrenheit, out here in the lowveld of Southern Africa. Fergus is on camera.
Hello, everybody.
That's his voice and hand showing that he's indeed present and alive. On the other vehicle, we have got Tristan Dix. He is heading towards the hyena den, I believe, and Jamie Patterson is on foot with Herbert and Sebastien. They will introduce themselves to you a little bit later. My plan this morning is to see if we can't find some lions that were yelling around here very early in the morning. As usual, however, they seem to have moved away, and as their calling progresses, so it seems that they've moved off Djuma. Anyway, we may be lucky, we may not. We'll see as the morning progresses. Hashtag Safari Live is how you get hold of us. That is on Twitter. It is quite chilly today, and I'm just warming up my lips. And I think the best way to do that is to show you a grey heron sitting at the other end of this waterhole, and I shall tell you about it while speaking in a very clear manner. Now, I believe there has been a conversation somewhere on the internet where it was suggested that Byron Sarau, who used to work here, or does work here from time to time, he freelances for us, should be teaching me a little bit about pronunciation. I, of course, on the back end of that conversation, will probably resign and possibly end my life at the end of this drive because, well, that is just terrifying. There is a gorgeous grey heron, and it is very stealthily walking through water that I'm sure must be giving it slightly achy ankles, very cold, and perhaps hoping to catch itself a frog or a fish. I just love the stealth with which they're able to move. I think it is quite phenomenal. And you can see there's almost no wave caused by the movement of those legs. Very sensitive feet that will pick up the slightest movement in the mud underneath. Natal Franklin shouting at us in the background, or spurfowl as they're now called, of course, and have been called for some 10 years or so. We still refer to those as the new names for some reason. Gosh, that must be cold. Just managing to keep its tail feathers out of the water. It seems to be stealthily feeling something, and all the time its feet are moving underneath the ground, just touching the mud here and there, gently feeling out what's going to move. And you can see there's definitely quite a lot of activity, either just below the surface or on the surface of the water. And it is yet another beautiful, perfect morning here. It is a little bit chilly, like I say, but it's still very pleasant to be out, especially when we're not moving too fast. And the great advantage of sitting like this, watching a beautiful bird, is that, of course, we do get to hear if those lions call again. They called late into the morning yesterday, all the way up to 8 o'clock. And today there doesn't seem to be quite the same enthusiasm. Anyway, the mysteries of the night will be unravelled by our reading of the bush newspaper, as the cliché goes, which is of course, the road in front of us, and also by the movement of the other guides and other vehicles around the place who will pick up tracks, and eventually perhaps some of the animals. Alright, I believe that Tristan Dix has checked the hyena den. There are no hyenas there, and at the moment and I think that he's got some tracks.
Well, no, James, unfortunately, no tracks yet. We've just got some steaming water as the cold starts to go away and the sun starts to rise. We have a little bit of condensation happening off the warmer water. Now, my name is Tristan, and on camera today I've got Craig, aka Batman, and like James says, we are looking for tracks, so we're trying to find any signs of lions that have been calling this morning. Apparently there were tracks that came into this area. So if any of you did see anything or heard anything, remember you can use #SafariLive and you'll be able to help us out and see if we can't find these lions this morning before they decide to go to sleep. Now, I am going to try and see if I can't just check around this area. I know that Treehouse Dam is sometimes a place that not only the lions will come past, but also the royal cubs, so Shongile and Hosana. So I was just checking in case, because I know Hosana was coming north last night from Little Gowrie up the Mulawati, so I thought maybe I'd just come and have a look here. Also, the lions sounded like they were calling somewhere on the western side, and so I was hoping that maybe they came this way. But, alas. So, Dr. Rob, all the way from Colorado, snowy Colorado, I believe. Well, it feels like it should snow here today. It's very, very cold. You're wondering if we get frost in the winter. I honestly, in this area, have never seen frost. I have heard that it has happened once or twice, but it never gets that cold here. So it normally is about sort of just over 0 degrees. We normally have temperatures of 1-2 degrees. That's kind of the average temperature for us. So very, very seldom would we get frost in this area. But apparently it can happen. I've just never seen it in the 9 years that I've been in the Lowvelds. If you go up onto the plateau and towards Johannesburg, then frost is very, very prominent in the winter. You actually see it pretty much every day in the winter times. But down here in the Lowvelds, no, it doesn't quite drop that cold. Now, just checking, I thought I saw some tracks here, so I just want to have a little look quickly. No, those are our hyena friends who weren't at the den this morning, which is a shame. I was hoping they would be there. Maybe with all this commotion of lions, they've decided to move off. But, yeah, alas, no tracks here. Right, we're going to carry on and see if I can't find these tracks that everyone was talking about. And while we do that, let's go across to Jamie, who's got a beautiful view of the big orange orb that's coming over the eastern horizon.
Good morning, and yes, I suppose you could say this is a beautiful view if you're really interested in footprints of the sand. I think it's beautiful anyway. My name is Jamie, and this morning Seb is once again demonstrating his faith in me that somehow we're actually going to find something today.
Good morning, everyone.
And we're going to be out on foot. I think we're going to try and help Tristan with his search for lions. I feel as though we've had lots of elephants on foot, and that's wonderful, but it would be really nice to find some cats on foot this morning on our bushwalk. But before we get started with that, we've got a really lovely mixture of creatures that have walked along this road past the camps overnight, and I thought it might be just a nice situation to compare the sizes of 3 different things with paws. One of which is a genet, which is the tiniest little foot, the other is a civet, and the other is a hyena. So if we have a look here at the tracks, and I think probably these are going to be the clearest ones. Here's the little genet's toes. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's a little back of its foot. I love genet feet. They're so perfectly formed. Tiny little perfect prints. And then, if we go on a little bit, here's the civet track over here. 1, 2, 3, there's the back of its foot. See how it's about double the size of that of a genet? No, even more than double the size of that of a genet. And then, of course, over here, the back foot of the hyena. The front foot's not particularly clear. The back foot of the hyena, which is much smaller than the front foot. So it's a nice comparison of size. It's also a nice demonstration of animal behavior, particularly with respect to the civet. Now, the civet walked down this road. Here's one track going that way. Walked down this road, off in search of food and marking its territory, and then walked straight back up on where his footprints fell. So these tracks here are pointing in the opposite direction, going straight back. And you'll see that with civets all the time. They walk a very strict route, depending on their nightly routine. And they'll always walk back the same, or almost always walk back the same route that they've travelled on. And that's really nice. It's a nice it's a nice way of aging tracks, because you know that at the beginning of an evening, a civet's going to be walking one way, and then the civet's going to be walking back at the end of the evening. So if you can work out which ones are fresher, which direction the civet was going in first and second, and you see the tracks on top of, let's say, a fresh set of lion tracks or a fresh set of leopard tracks, then you've got a really nice idea as to exactly when that track won or when that animal walked along. So that's why it's important to know the different types of tracks. And don't forget to send through your questions on #SafariLive on Twitter. We've already started out with some small paw prints. Hopefully we can find some big ones for you. We're going to take a quick shortcut past the dam and then on our way to figure out where these lions have gone. But while we do that, it sounds as though James has found the first bird of the morning.
There is a bird of the morning indeed, waiting to see if it can't perhaps pick up the first rays of the sun. It is a magpie shrike. Wah. Isn't it sweet? I think it's still a youngster in its first year. It's puffed itself out because, of course, it is quite chilly. And this, of course, is its first really cold day in its short existence. And that kind of less than attractive noise it's making, because they make two noises, one very attractive and one very unattractive, is a juvenile sound, and I think it's because it's a juvenile magpie shrike. There is also a little pair of Nyalas that has now disappeared. Let's just go around the corner here. I have heard no more sign of lions. There they are. You see them there, Ferg? Is that right?
Yeah.
Just see the red colours there. Now that's a cow, or a little cow, sorry. And there's a young bull around here as well. And I wondered to myself, as I see his coat turning from that rich red to the sort of russety charcoal, if he feels the same sense of excitement that I did when I first, had the first whisperings of a moustache on my top lip, and the first time that I shaved it off, thinking, now, boy, you are a man. Which of course was rubbish, because I was about 12. But I wondered if the Nyala was feeling the same sort of thing. What do you think, Fergus?
I think he would be.
You think he would be?
Yeah.
Okay, good. That's the correct answer. Must always agree with me. I'm a presenter, which means I have an enormously fragile ego. Now, what greater evidence could there be of the effect of stripes there as it walks through the exactly parallel grass there? And I don't know, we talk about camouflage and the fact that it breaks up the outline a bit. I think maybe it does. I don't know. If I look at the screen that I'm looking at now and I sort of allow my eyes to defocus, so I suppose those stripes do play a huge role in disguising the Nyala. Good morning, my dear. How are you? It is so peaceful. Which I keep saying, of course, on these winter mornings, because there is so little sound. Just a few robins, a couple of hornbills, some magpie shrikes, of course. But it always seems to be a little bit further away, much less close. Well, there's the bull. Yes, just shaved his first little moustache off. And you can see that charcoal colour just starting to come on his back there. It's just getting darker than she is. And eventually, of course, there will be a white mantle. You see the white mantle just popping out on his back. And the transformation that he is going to undergo to his full sort of, I guess it would be called regalia almost. Because that's what a Nyala bull has. It has regalia, I suppose. Its fur is so magnificent. It really does look like it's been dressed up. I also sometimes wonder to myself, do animals that get horns experience the same sort of pain that animals, well, that all mammals of course get teeth, but you know we get teething pains. Do you think they get horning pains? I'm sure they must do, with the eruption of those things from their skulls. You can just feel how very quiet it is. When I got up early this morning to have my coffee and a little bit of a read, it was just completely silent outside, except for the two lions that called once and then ceased their wassailing. And then Fergus. Ooh. On the road we have the Birchall's glossy starling, which looks to be finding some insects. There it is. Obviously it is now... it is very unpleasant of it. Now, Genevieve, you're wondering if there is the bird species that will preen its mate or young more than other species. I think you'll find that there probably are. I'm not sure which ones they are. I know that the Wahlberg's eagle, for example, they do a lot of mutual preening amongst the couple. I don't know how much youngster preening they do, or if they do it any more than any other bird, but I think you'll find that any monogamous pair of birds, so as opposed to sort of birds that philander about the place willy-nilly, as it were, I think you'll find that they probably do a little bit less allo-preening than the birds that are monogamous, because they reaffirm those pair bonds by their allo-preening. Nice question, thank you. Right, we're going to press on from these Nyalas and see what else it is that we might be able to find. Oh dear, Sisyphus. That Sisyphus bush nearly took my leggy blankie from me, but it's okay. There it is. All right, let's head across to Tristan and find out if he's actually managed to find those lion tracks yet. Go.
Well, no, James. I don't know who saw them, but there's definitely no lion tracks on Weaver's Nest. I've driven the whole of Weaver's Nest. I've checked Gowrie Main to the west. Nothing so far. Now I'm just going back on the fire break just to check if maybe I missed something. But so far I haven't seen any sign of lion tracks anywhere. It might be further down towards Baboon Pan, so I'll go check up that way. And maybe just one of the guys from the south got confused about the roads and ended up seeing tracks differently. I did also see tracks for a young female leopard on Gowrie Main, but they crossed south into Little Gowrie, so no chance of following those, which I would imagine must be for Shingile. I don't think there can be any other leopard walking around that. Maybe, though, you never know. Maybe one of the other young females, but nobody's got feet as small as hers at the moment. Most of the other young females in the area, like Tiani and Nyala and varying others, have all got much bigger feet than what she does. So I would imagine that it must be her, which is good to know that she is around and moving around. But other than that, no sort of fresh tracks for any cats at all. So I really am not sure where these guys saw these tracks. I looked very, very carefully. I drove slowly, so I don't know. And I also drove the whole of Weaver's Nest. And if it was a lion, typically, as we saw yesterday when Jamie was tracking lions, that they walk on the road for long periods of time. So they like to use roads, and it's very seldom that you're going to find a lion just crossing a road. And especially if they come off a big road onto another main road, there's very seldom they're just going to turn off that road and into the bush, unless they were hunting. So I'm very surprised we have not seen any tracks, if they were indeed somewhere there. But we are, like I say, just doing a sort of back loop again, just to make sure, in case these tracks are somewhere here that I missed. It can happen from time to time. But as far as I can see, there's no particular sign that they were here. But we do have tracks for those elephants. Surprise, surprise, there are elephants tracks all over this fire break and moving around in this area. So I wonder if they're not somewhere close by too. It's going to be interesting to see if they all disappear as quickly as they all arrived, because it went from no elephants to many elephants, and then I wonder if it's just going to go from many elephants to no elephants again. Might be that case. You can see their dung all strewn across the road here, and most of this is from last night. It's actually not from now or this morning. You can see it's got quite a sort of dark colouring to it, and that generally means that it's got a little bit of a drier outside or sort of exterior, which means it would have been probably early last night, and over the course of the night it dried a little bit, and now when we come along, us driving over it is causing it to smell quite a bit and sort of still seem fairly fresh. But there's also lots of tracks of hyena and civet all on top of the elephant tracks as well. The only problem with driving east at the moment is you drive straight into the sun, and it's very difficult to actually see anything around you. So spotting certain individuals in grass like this when you're looking straight into the sun is not particularly easy at all. Ranger. Well, guides are much like what we are. We taking you on a safari around the reserve, and we're showing you the animals and interpreting what we're seeing to you and trying to paint a picture of what we're seeing so that you can understand better the environment that we're in. Whereas a ranger will be somebody that's going to be out doing patrols, doing road maintenance, doing fence maintenance. So they're the guys that are actually looking after the park. They're not looking after the guests that come to the reserve. They're looking after the actual animals and the terrain itself, and making sure that there's no poachers, that they're keeping any sort of threat out of this particular area. And so that's what the difference is. Back in the day it was one and the same thing, but now as things have slightly become more professional, so they've split into two different facets. Right, let me carry on and just see if I can't find anything for these tracks a little bit further east. Maybe they crossed a little bit further down. And while we do that, I believe Jamie is still walking around, as she will be for most of the morning, and enjoying the sunshine.
I'm enjoying the sunshine. I'm standing enjoying it and basking in it, as is Seb. As is Herbie, actually. Just enjoying it. Herbie appears to be warming up his back this morning first, and then he's going to warm up the rest of him. This is Herbie, everybody, for our new viewers. Herbie takes very, very good care of us, especially when I'm busy talking to the camera and because I'm listening to your questions. Having Herbie around is a huge help indeed. Right, so we're going to talk about a tree for our new viewers, because it's something I think we often neglect. We've been talking so much about trying to make bushwalks interesting and do stuff that you haven't seen before, which obviously gets more and more tricky during the winter months. But it's lovely to talk about some stuff for our newer viewers as well, because I think sometimes we forget. This particular tree would be a really very good tree for you all to be able to identify. And the reason behind that is it is supremely, supremely toxic. And by that I mean a teaspoon of the latex of this plant, and let me show you what I mean. A teaspoon of, that's not very helpful. Let's find a nice young leaf that will have a bit more to show. There we go. A teaspoon of this milky white latex, there you go, can you see it exuding from the end of that leaf? Will kill a person. It is highly, highly poisonous. And apparently, if you put a dab of that, just a drop on an aching tooth or a sore gum, it helps. I'm not going to test that. I have no desire to test that. I seriously don't think that it's going to do any good. I have tested it in the past and it didn't help at all, and I just felt rather ill. It's a really good tree to be able to identify. You've seen the leaves. This is one of the ways that we teach people to identify trees. You can have a good look at the shape of the leaf, the venation of the leaf, in other words, the way that the veins are positioned on the leaf itself, the jagged edges, the perfectly central midrib, and then the veins coming out from either side. Have a good look at that, because even if you come out here and you're out gathering wood to make a fire, if you see, for example, oh look, there's some convenient kindling to start my fire, and you then cook on it, or you sit and inhale the smoke from it, or worst of all, you roast a marshmallow on it over the fire, you are going to be very ill. And there are certain situations where unsuspecting people have actually collected tambuti wood and it's made them sick. It's actually killed 1 or 2 children in the past, because of course children are more susceptible to the effects of the poison. So it'll give you sort of a constant vomiting, really very upset stomach, and ultimately could result in death. So good tree to be able to identify. Very rough, scaly bark. But the reason that I showed you the leaves is because this is the bark of a mature tree. And if you look behind here, peeking out over here, can you see it through there, Seb? Oh, sorry, you got your antenna in a tambuti. There we go. Tambuti everywhere. If you have a look here, this is a young tambuti. The bark doesn't look anything like that crocodile skin, which is why the first thing I showed you was those leaves. So beware if you ever go to Kruger. If you're in a campsite where you can make a fire, not all of them do allow fires, you really don't want to burn wood from this tree. Apparently it's quite a good place to make a camp underneath a thicket of tambuti trees, because it tends to keep away the mosquitoes. Apparently, that's what I've been told. But just be aware then that you can't go and collect any wood from the ground, because you could run the risk of seriously making yourself very, very ill. So, animals not affected by it at all. Black rhino really love it. Elephants eat it. Apparently, if they feel a bit ill, an elephant will come and eat a tambuti tree. And porcupine as well. Speaking of trees, John would like to know, good morning John, you'd like to know if there are baobab trees here. There aren't, unfortunately, unless one's been planted potentially somewhere in a garden. There aren't any baobab trees. They tend to occur further north in the more arid areas. They do occur in the Greater Kruger. There are quite a few in the Greater Kruger. The southernmost baobab tree is just outside of Hoedspruit. So there are baobab trees in the area, but most of them would have been planted. And I spent one very eventful evening where I used to work. They'd planted a little baby baobab. I spent one very interesting evening trying to keep an elephant from eating it when it broke into the garden. I was trying to feed off the baobab tree. They take a long time to grow, and technically not actually really a tree. That's why they get those massive hollows in the middle, because they're actually succulents. But I have spent a lot of time up in areas like Mapungubwe, which is on the border between Zimbabwe and Botswana. Baobabs are the most stunning trees in the world. They're the upside-down trees. They look as though they've been planted upside down in winter when they don't have their leaves. The fruit is also delicious. It's very tart. It's the best way of describing it. It's sort of a citrusy taste, but it's very, very tart. It tastes like tartaric acid. It's got tartaric acid in it. But it is delicious, very powdery, and you can make a delicious drink from it. I've climbed up and sat in baobabs before and watched the sunset. They're beautiful, beautiful trees. Unfortunately, not one that we have here. I heard a rumor that there was one planted somewhere, not on Djuma, but on Cheetah Plains. I don't know whether or not that's true. I've never found it. It'd be very difficult to find. And of course, a baby baobab unattended, almost invariably going to get munched upon by elephants. Right, let's carry on. We might speak quite a bit about trees this morning, depending on what we find. Apparently the lions are in Buffelshoek, so they're up to the north. But you never know, we might get lucky. And sounds as though James has beaten us to Buffelshoek Dam. I think he's at Buffelshoek Dam. He has certainly, either way, found a hippopotamus.
Yes, we have managed to beat Jamie to Buffelshoek Dam. I don't think that's a great big surprise, given that, of course, we are in a car, and she is not. But there's a wonderful scene playing out here in the mist, and I mean, I did come here because she thought she heard lions calling from around this area. I've seen not hide nor hair of any lion around here. So I don't know, they certainly weren't where I thought they were calling from. They don't appear to be where Jamie thought they were calling from, so who knows where they've gone. But isn't the picture of the mist moving slowly across the surface of the water very attractive? I'm getting reports now that the lions went to Buffelshoek apparently. I'm not sure where those are coming from, but that's sad. Oh well, we will see what else we can see around here, I suppose. I especially love the puffing of his misty breath into the air. Come on, puff again. Give us a little puff. There we are. That's so cool. Can hear hyenas calling out of Buffelshoek. But not a great deal else. It's all very peaceful. And I find it very interesting that those lions have not called again, that they were yelling last night, or yelling yesterday until fairly late into the morning. And yet now they have ceased and desisted. And I really thought we'd hear them again. Donna, you're wondering if Hosanna would leave this area with the lions calling. No, I don't think so. I think he would avoid them. But I think that the call, for example, of most probably Tingana yesterday morning, or could have been Gijima, one of the territorial males of this area, I think they would induce him to move away. He will not want to come across a lion or a leopard, but when a lion roars, what it's doing basically is advertising its presence. And if you're trying to avoid it, it's actually quite nice when it roars because you know exactly where it is. And you will find that things like, their prey species like impala and buffalo and wildebeest and that sort of thing, if they hear a roaring predator or territorially marking predator, they don't alarm call. They don't even look alarmed because they know that that creature is not on the hunt, A, and B, they know where it is. Now, I think the same probably applies to something like Hosanna, which obviously he doesn't want to come across a lion ever. But if he knows where they are, he knows how to avoid them. So I don't think he'd necessarily move away. He might if there was an enormous amount of lion activity in an area, but there hasn't been an enormous amount of activity. There's just a bit of calling. But I think he would actively remove himself from a situation where there was a territorial male leopard. He would certainly make himself inconspicuous, because they don't only, of course, track each other by the sound of their own territorial calls. So if Hosana was anywhere near an area where Tingana or Djuma were marking their territory, they'd pick up his scent, and they would almost certainly be deeply offended by his presence, and so he'd move away. But I think a lion comes across leopard scent all the time, and I don't think they necessarily worry about the leopard unless they manage to find it, in which case, of course, they will unfortunately kill it, if they can. So, in a roundabout way, I don't think Hosana would be necessarily affected. For those of you who are new viewers, Hosana is a little leopard cub. Well, he's not that little anymore. He's about 16 months old. And, excuse me, I've got a frog in my throat. And his name means little chief. It is not, it does not mean praise the Lord. It is not Hosanna. It is Hosana, which means the little chief, from Hosi, which means chief, and Hosana is the diminutive form of that word. So Hosana means little chief. Was it Dixie wondering about how many hours hippos stay in the water a day? Is it Dixie? Wig Hill. I'm struggling. Nikhil with an N. Alright, how I got Dixie out of that is quite astounding. My brain is obviously not quite woken up yet. Nikhil, they will spend probably about 16 hours a day in the water. And that is quite a long time, isn't it? Possibly on summer's days even more than that. They'll spend some of the darkness hours out of the water and some of the darkness in the water, but they can spend up to 16 hours a day in the water, and they have a thick covering of blubber so that they don't get cold. And what it allows them to do, of course, is eat apparently far less than something of equivalent mass. So something like a rhino, for example, eats apparently around about, I think it's 30 or 40 kilograms of food a day. And something like this apparently eats about half of that. Now, of course, these studies are done not on wild animals. They're done normally on captive animals, so, there will be huge amounts of variation, and the sample sizes are also very small. And it's interesting, just talking about that, this new mammal app that I have is a really good one because it tells you the sample size. So when it says that a hippopotamus bull can weigh 2,500 kilograms, it tells you how many samples that's based on. And most books don't do that, so you'll read that it's based on a sample of 5. Well, I mean, it's hardly a representative sample of any population, 5. So it just gives you a rough idea. Whereas if you read a sort of garden variety textbook, if you like, or safari guide, you'll get, they will state that a hippopotamus weighs about 2,500 kilograms. And, well, they might, but that would probably only be based on one hippopotamus. And the same goes, of course, for how long they spend underwater and for how much they eat. Colleen, you're wondering how cold it gets and how it affects the hippos. I don't think it affects any of the animals out here too much at all. I think they cope with it. It gets down to about 4 degrees when it gets really cold here. 4 degrees Celsius, that's not Fahrenheit. It's about 45 degrees Fahrenheit, which really is not particularly cold. We complain like stuck pigs, but the animals don't seem to mind too much. And it gets cold gradually as we go into the winter, so the animals get thicker coats and they get a sort of, they get a winter coat. And I think the hippo probably put on a bit of extra blubber to help them stay a little bit warmer when they're in the water. It's a beautiful artistic shot you have there, Fergus. Yes.
Going blind.
You're going blind, are you? Yes. Well, as long as you are doing it for the cause, it doesn't really matter. And so, yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't think it affects them too much at all. They don't seem to like it when there's no sun, though, so they will often bask out of the water if there's no sun. And, of course, on a winter's day when there isn't a lot of hot sun, they will often bask out of the water. But they can. I mean, it's chilly this morning and the hippos are in the water and not showing any signs of hypothermia just yet. Hypothermia, sorry. Oh, and an oxpecker has arrived. Donald, you want to know why a hippopotamus's skin doesn't wrinkle in water? I don't know. I hate to admit it, but I don't even know why our skin wrinkles in water. Do you know, Fergus?
Because it absorbs the water.
Because it absorbs the water, so it becomes less than waterproof, even in warm water. So it absorbs the water. I think you're probably right. Maybe it absorbs a little bit of water. I used to think that it may be that the blood was moving away from the extremities, which caused a lack of hydraulic pressure, and therefore you got that sort of wrinkly effect. But I'm not sure that that is the case, because of course it happens even when you're in a hot bath. So I don't know. I'd love to know. I'm assuming it's because there's a huge amount of blubber around there, and that blubber makes it it keeps the skin taut. Oh, that's beautiful. Very pretty indeed. Hello, Stanley. You're wondering why it is that the hippopotamus is unable to swim, but the elephant can. Stanley, I think it's slightly a little bit of a kind of misconception, to be honest. A hippo is not a great swimmer. It sinks to the bottom. But that's not to say they drown. They just don't have the... they're heavy, they're dense, so they sink, and that helps them to stay under the water. And I think you'll find that elephants... I wonder, can elephants actually swim other than stand? Do elephants float, for example? I think you'll find that elephants, a little bit like us, would sort of struggle to float unless their lungs were filled with oxygen. And I'm really not sure that if you watched an elephant swimming, or if you watched an elephant in some very deep water, if you wouldn't find that they too sort of drop to the bottom and then push themselves up to the top. I'm not sure that they float particularly effectively either. Does that make sense? This is a very pleasant little scene. I'd quite like it if they had a bit of a territorial fight in this weather. It would look quite amusing. The light dancing across the surface of the water like that. I'm just being hailed on the radio by Tristan. I've now lost the radio, naturally, which fills me with a deep sense of irritation. Go ahead, go ahead. Okay, copy, thanks. Tristan's just saying tracks of lions on Chitwa, but nothing coming this side of the world. And no tracks of Hosana. But plenty of beautiful hippo activity here. Now, White Lady Irwin, I've heard this before and I don't buy it, and I don't mean this is any kind of contradiction of you, but you say that laboratory tests have confirmed that our wrinkly skin underwater. Oh, there we got a head up. That's marvelous. That our wrinkly skin under the water helps with grip. I'll tell you why I don't buy it. I don't doubt that it would perhaps help with grip. I'm not sure what it would help us grip though. And I'm also not sure why then we would suddenly require grip under the water after an extended period in the water. Why wouldn't our fingers just go immediately wrinkly when we got into the water if we required sort of gecko-esque powers of climbing under the water? Doesn't make any sense to me. So while that might be a byproduct of wrinkly skin, I don't believe that's why it happens. Does everyone follow that logic? It doesn't make any sense to me. Brian, you want to know how warm the water is? Brian, I would say it probably is at about 19 degrees Celsius, which is about pushing 70 degrees Fahrenheit. It's not too cold. I don't think it's too cold. It's quite shallow. It would have warmed up nicely yesterday. I suppose it's chilly-ish this morning, but I don't think it's, the sun's now on it. It's not going to lose any further heat. Does everyone follow my logic there on the wrinkly skin thing? I just don't see how it is or why it is that we would suddenly, develop this wrinkliness after such an extended period in the water. Right, Tristan is now going to update you on his attempts at tracking, and I'm going to move on from the hippopotami.
Well, I think our lion tracking is really not actually very successful, since there's not a single track of a lion anywhere to be found. Apparently the tracks for the sticks are somewhere around Chitwa, so I think James is heading that way. He's going to carry that on. And as for our tracks for lions, I've checked all along Gowrie Main, I've checked Baboon Pan, Twin Dams, all that area. There is not a single track for any lion. So where this lion came from last night that was calling near quarantine, I'm really not sure. Must have come maybe from the west, so I'm going to head towards Arathusa side and just see if I can't find anything. What is encouraging is if we do find tracks going into Djuma, the fact that James has been around Buffelshoek Dam and must have done the northern sections means that in all likelihood they haven't crossed out. So I'm going to go quickly just check around and see if I can't find any signs on Arathusa itself and check if there's no tracks going that way. But other than that, it's been quiet. We haven't seen a single animal since we've been driving around. Just lots of coldness, especially in the Mulawati. The Mulawati was quite cold this morning, but it seems now that the sun is coming out and actually can feel that warmth on our backs as we're driving now. It's very pleasant. I'm also looking for any signs of shadow while we're here, just in case. I have not heard any updates about her or her cub, whether that cub is still alive or anything like that. So I would like to find her, or at least find some sort of sign that the cub's tracks are with hers. That would be quite nice as well, but as of yet, nothing. Right, so while I forge my way to the west, I believe Jamie's found something that's rather creepy with 8 legs.
I think they're very pretty, and I think that we're very lucky the fact that we've had quite a few really lovely orb spider sightings. In this case, another garden orb like the one that Seb and I saw on the walk not so long ago, and she's roughly the same size as the one we saw 2 days ago, but she has made an absolutely massive and really truly perfect web. She's moved up a little way, just onto the sort of the anchor strands of her web, which is, well, they're not quite as gold as, I just don't want to disturb her web at all. They're not quite as gold as that of a golden orb, but still very, very strong. And whenever an orb spider feels in any way threatened, what they'll do is they'll run up the anchor web, and sometimes all the way up into wherever that strand is actually anchored, which in this case I think is on this absolutely massive knobthorn tree. The perfect place for her to have built a web nice, stable, secure spot. I always find spider webs an absolute work of art, and particularly those of orb webs, because they're so big that you can actually really see the engineering and the structure and the anchor strands and everything linking together so beautifully to create what is essentially a work of art, but a very deadly one. If we have a look here, this poor, I think it's a grasshopper, it's sort of hard to tell. This poor grasshopper has met its fate in her web, obviously didn't see it coming and has been trapped inside it, and she's gathered it up to the center of her web, as orb web spiders do, and she's busy wrapping it up in a cocoon of her silk to keep it safe and store it for a little bit later when she decides to consume it. And she's lucky, this particular orb web, in that I don't think, oh no, there's one dewdrop spider that will be intent on stealing her kill. But other than that, she'll have it all to herself. I don't even see any signs of the males. Now, the male orb webs are very tiny, about 1/10 of the size of the female, and they have to be very careful about how they go about the whole mating process, because if they approach it wrong, if they create too much movement on the web, if they imitate prey in any way, then she might eat them. And she might actually eat them anyway, even if she does mate with them. Now, these strands here, apart from strengthening the web, I don't know if you can see the sort of the thickened silk there, Seb. These strands here serve a couple of purposes. One, it's nice when you leave your hand behind. Shall I leave my hand behind there?
Yeah, then we see it better.
Okay, perfect. So these will serve as an anchor, a strengthening sort of strand for the center of the web, but also at the same time you can see they're a lot more visible than the rest of the web. And that, along with the kill in the center, is a great way of basically drawing attention to her web for something that's a bit larger. So a big bird or an antelope or something like that, because otherwise she'd spend her life rebuilding her web, because things would just go crashing straight through and not notice that it was there. Something occasionally being human beings. So it's a very clever way of basically notifying big animals, but not allowing it to be seen by the smaller creatures, the insects that she wants to eat. And despite her bright colors and scary-looking appearance, Keith, you want to know about whether or not there are lots of venomous spiders out here. I actually don't have that many. We've got the orb web spiders are not venomous at all. They've got a painful bite, but I mean, for a large spider, that makes sense. But they don't have any venom at all. It's the smaller, more innocent-looking spiders that are the ones to worry about. And out here, your 3 big ones are going to be the button spiders, like the ones in the tent, the brown ones, the sack spiders, and the violin spiders. So the various button spiders and then the sack and the violin. Those are the ones that we really get nervous about out here. And otherwise, the rest are completely harmless. Well, I think we've seen enough scary-looking arachnids for now. Let's go across to something cute and fluffy.
It is very cute, isn't it? And we've been sitting here. We haven't moved from Buffelshoek Dam. It's on that gorgeous tambuti tree just the other side of the wall. And the squirrel has had a very relaxed morning. It has woken up and it's sat on a little knot in the tree, and then it's had a stretch, and now it's exposed its further surface area to the warming of the sun. It's watching us. It's completely safe there in its tree. It's just having the best time. Not a care in the world. Aren't they sweet? Of course, the carefree existence of the squirrel, well, not likely to last for too long. They will have to worry and watch out for birds of prey, snakes, mongoose, genets. And so while the life of and even leopards, while the life of a squirrel may look idyllic, no, not so much. They weigh in at just 190 grams. Now, I've got absolutely no idea what that is in ounces. And 190 grams is, well, it's roughly just under 1/10 of a pound. So he's very small. And there'll be a hole somewhere in the branch, in the trunk of this tree, in which he lives. Look at him having his stretch and his yawn. He's sticking his little tongue out as he yawns. Now that stretching is crucially important, and there's a very good reason that your dog and your cat, when they stand up after a long snooze, do a sort of downward dog position and then bend their backs and stretch the other way and stretch their feet out in front of them. It allows blood to start moving through the muscles and through the joints, and that of course prevents injury. And it's the same reason that if you're doing any kind of strenuous sport, you want to warm up slowly when you get a bit older, and have some stretching. It's very, very important, and it prevents injury. That's why they do it. It's an evolutionary response. Now, another nice one from Stanley. Yes, that is his name, everybody. You're wondering about whether or not we have flying squirrels. We do not have any flying squirrels, I'm afraid. I've seen one flying squirrel, and that was in Thailand. And the flying squirrel had attached itself after a brief flight to a palm tree, and everyone took pictures of it. But these squirrels are not flying at all. This one is a tree squirrel, and it locomotes by running. And a flying squirrel, for those of you who don't know, he's getting tired now, he's going to have a bit of a snooze, is a squirrel that jumps from tree to tree with that sort of extended, what would we call it? I guess membranous flap of skin that extends between the back and front legs, and it looks almost like a sort of mini bat wing almost, and it allows them to glide through the air from treetop to treetop. Oh, he's going to sleep. Look at how cute is that? David, you say, how would they act to a snake that visited them in their holes? I think that if you get cornered in your tree hole, and this is the great disadvantage with living in the safety of a hole. Yes, it gives you warmth. Yes, from the big predators you're safe. But when something like a snake sticks its head in the door, you have only one option, and that's to attack, because you are then cornered. And so you'll find that they will attack viciously. They're rodents. They've got very sharp front teeth, and they've probably got a slightly less than equal chance of beating off a snake. And I think you'll find a snake, like a worm slung or tree snake, or even a cobra, which can climb well, would largely go for little ones. But once, of course, the fangs sink into the flesh, well, it's all over then. James, you're wondering about territorial sizes for these squirrels and whether they have bigger or smaller territories, male or female. They're not actually strictly territorial as far as I'm aware. I'm just going to quickly check that for you. They have... Apparently they're quite territorial over their families, they're quite territorial over their partners, and they actually anally gland mark each other, which sounds like a deeply distressing practice, but I don't think they're that territorial. I'll do a little bit of research onto that. While I do that, let's head across to Jamie, who has got the larger of the troglodytes.
One of the larger ones, actually kind of in the middle, between bushbuck and kudu, we have a Nyala bull that is slowly disappearing into the dense vegetation. I hope he's going to stick around and not go too far, because he's a really beautiful specimen. And typically, we speak a lot about the fact that the animals see us in our bipedal human form as actually quite a dangerous thing. as a dominant predator of the daytime. But typically Nyala are actually the most relaxed of all of the antelope. They tend to be relatively calm. And they are one of the antelope that you see quite frequently in camp gardens, just because they do relax. But what I want to show you, hello boy, this is what I want to show you, is the way that his horns almost have grown to the point where they almost touch at the top. There he goes. He's so pretty. And I've seen that in quite a few Nyala bulls, but one that I got to see quite regularly was one whose horns touched completely at the top. We used to call him Tippy. I don't know why, it doesn't really make any sense, but we used to call him Tippy. The big Nyala bull whose horns had grown all the way and touched together. You can see the little white patches, or you probably couldn't actually, but the little white patches growing at the end of the horn. And that's one of the indications that he is a fully mature Nyala bull. So it would have taken him around about 4 years to get to that point. No, I think he's disappeared, unfortunately. We'll try again. We'll try walk around him. David, you want to know if antelope and deer are related? They are, in a sense that they are both ruminants. They essentially form the same ecological niche, or they fall into the same ecological niche in different places. There are a couple of fundamental differences, of course, the horns being the biggest one. And that's the idea, well, that's the fact that horn is bone. Antlers are not bone. They're combinations of sort of hardened blood vessels and other substances that aren't permanent. So deer shed their antlers, antelope do not. If an antelope breaks its horn, I think we can actually see it from a little bit further on. If an antelope breaks its horn, that's it. That's it done. It won't ever heal up again, be broken for the rest of its life. Once it grows, it's grown, that's it. But, I mean, essentially deer and antelope fill very similar places in nature. We have antelope here in Africa, deer in Europe and the North Americas, those sorts of areas. And they are herbivores, they are ruminants. They form a solid dietary basis for a lot of the predators. I really would love to see a moose, and I would love to see an elk. Something that we've spoken about a lot. I've obviously seen a lot of the small deer species while I lived in the UK. There he is. Isn't he beautiful? Look at him peering out at us. That white chevron across his nose. I love Nyala face markings. Now, Marco, you'd like to know which of the antelope habituate the best. Nyala, probably. They're the easiest to habituate. Bushbuck also get used to people quite quickly. Their larger cousins, the kudu, tend not to habituate nearly so easily. You don't often see them around people. Waterbuck also get quite used to people quite quickly, and I guess impala do as well. I tried the whole process of habituating wildebeest, but that didn't work out so well. And I spoke yesterday about my neighbours when I was a child, who had little tiny blue duiker in their garden and steenbok in their garden. But it's the Nyala really out here in this particular area that we see the most of. Nyala, and I know we're not now talking about antelope, but warthog. Warthog also get used to the presence of people quite quickly. And they'll spend a lot of time, because around a camp, the gardens are often watered, or there's pipes under the ground that inevitably are slightly leaky, so there's a lot of green grass. It's the perfect place for them. Plus, they probably know that they are less likely to encounter a predator in a camp than they are. That doesn't mean they won't. I've had a Nyala taken out by a leopard in a garden before, so it's not impossible. But they probably know it's a bit safer for them. And the Nyala will get to the point where you can walk within a meter of them, provided you don't stand and stare at them. And deer watcher? Yes, my apologies, I don't think I was very clear. The horns do keep growing with age. They will reach a cut-off point, so it plateaus after a while. So if you think about the horn growth, over time. In the first few years, the growth of the horn is very rapid, and then after about 4 years old, then the growth of the horn starts to slow down, slowly but surely, and until a point where it's growing so slowly so as to be barely noticeable. But if an antelope does break a horn, that damage is done. Those blood vessels are done. It's living bone. So as soon as you break that bone, or as soon as they break that bone, it might continue to grow. It'll be very deformed if it does. That's why you see impala with funny droopy looking horns, or you sometimes even get a split in horns that they grow off in different directions. But it'll never grow properly, and it'll never recover. And if it's snapped off completely, that's it. It won't grow back properly, because it heals over, because it is living bone, it heals over and it forms quite a hard cap, and it never continues to grow further from there. Very common to see something like a gemsbok with walking around with one horn. We used to call them unicorns, because they've got those amazingly straight horns. So if you think about, this is really quite a shabby graph, but if you think about horn growth for the first, oh goodness, okay, let's stop being lazy and actually just get down. Let's just do this properly. There's the rate of the growth of the horn. There's the age of the impala in years. X-axis, Y-axis. For 4 years, the growth is very, very rapid, and then it sort of plateaus out. Continues to go, but it will be at a much, much slower rate. So there you go. That's your rate of horn growth. Beautiful. Graphs in the sand. Let's move on from maths and see what else we can find. I think our Nyala has left us. It just ran behind us, completely unexpected. And we're still talking about antelope, and conveniently enough, Tristan has got a very fluffy one.
We do indeed, but it is a very weird situation that we have. We've got a little young male on the right. You can see he's very small, and that would typically still be with its mom. But it almost seems like it's trying to latch onto this big male, and the big male keeps posturing and making sort of signs that he's trying to kind of mate with this young male. It's very odd. And the two of them are kind of walking around in circles, and every now and then you'll find the big male waterbuck sort of displays by fleming, grimacing, and he lifts his head and shows his horns. It's a very strange situation. Now, generally, a young waterbuck of that size, like I say, should be with its mom and a herd, but I don't see any other waterbuck in this area at all. So it seems like maybe this little male has lost its mother, and that's why it's trying to sort of latch on to this bigger male that is just not having any of it. And that posturing maybe is not mating, but is a sort of display to this little male, go away, I'm the big dominant male here, I don't want you here. It's a very, very weird situation indeed. I've never actually seen this before between waterbuck, and I see he's now moving off and is quite happy that the young male is going. I wonder if the young male is going to come back towards this one. It's amazing to think, though, that little one's horns are going to end up the size of what this male was, and he's got massive, massive horns. Yeah, I see he's now moving off completely. Let's see if the little one follows. But very, very odd. Craig was just actually saying to me, he was saying, do they not hang around in herds together? And they do. So generally you would find females and their babies all together and forming a group, and then the male would just be on the fringes, or you'd have a little bachelor herd of males, but generally on the fringe of females. So very strange that there's a young male. Like I said, that I can only think that maybe his mom, unfortunately, is gone, and that's why he's trying to kind of seek company. There is a herd of zebras behind, so maybe they'll be friends. So Chitty Chatty, the big male, you're wondering if it'll hurt this little one. Well, no, I don't think so. I think the big male knows full well that this little waterbuck is actually no threat at all. It doesn't really have the size or the horn size to kind of threaten that male. But it will get to a point where that big male might start to get a bit irritated with being followed and being sort of sniffed and prodded, and you might find then he just sort of reacts out of frustration and might hit this little baby away. But I don't think it would be anything too serious. I doubt that it would try and kill this little one or injure it in any way other than just out of sheer irritation and just to try and sort of push it along and say, well, I'm not your mother, leave me alone. You see he's disappeared. I'm going to go forward just a little bit because we've got some zebras as well that are in the long grass in front. So, Ali, the reason they're called waterbuck is because of their proximity to water all the time. You will very seldom find a waterbuck that is more than 5 kilometers away from water, and the reason why that is because they actually use water as a safety mechanism. So when they are being hunted by varying predators that they do have, so there's a lot of animals that do eat them, wild dogs, lion, leopard, and all the others, they will then run towards water in order to seek safety. So they use that as a way of getting away from predators. The other side of it is that they are quite dependent on water in that they like to find the food that is around water. They know that generally where water is good grazing, and so that's why they spend a lot of time. But it's beautiful now, one of these male, I think it looks like the stallion, has now come out into the sunlight. Hello guys, I haven't seen zebras in so long. It's quite nice to actually see them again. They're such beautiful animals, and you kind of miss them after a while. And this morning has been so quiet. These are the first animals that we've actually found, so it's nice to see some zebras, and I'm sure they're on their way to the Arathusa airstrip. I did check around for our jackal family, for those of you that are interested in the jackals. I know James and Aaron, you both always ask about the jackals, but they are not there this morning. It seems that Arathusa is having another bush breakfast. I keep timing this very badly, and so there's tables everywhere and activity, and so I'm sure the jackals have moved off a little bit from there. But it's all very peaceful at this stage. There's very little going on the radio, very little going on in the animal world, and everyone seems to be having a very relaxed morning. Maybe because it's quite cold this morning, everyone's got a bit shocked and is going to take it easy, and as it starts to warm up, hopefully we'll start to see them all coming out and us getting things a little bit busier around this area. So Nick, you're asking whether the grass shouldn't be greener at this time of the year. Well, yes, I suppose it could be. Don't forget, we've just come off a very bad drought last year. So there was no grass. Where we are now, if you took a picture in October last year, this would have been barren soil. There would not have been one blade of grass here. So what's happened is that the grass then grew, and we had rain this year, but not actually that much. It's been more than we had in the previous year, but not a lot of rain. And so what's happened is we had this kind of flush of grass, and now as the temperatures have changed and it's starting to get drier, so the grass is dying very quickly. But if you look at the base of the grass, it is actually still quite green. So there's sort of green tufts and shoots in the bottom there, and then this is just these long stalks where they've seeded that are now dying off. The seed is now dropped, and so the sort of stalk or stem of the grass is going to die away and turn brown, but there's still a little green layer at the bottom, and that's what the zebras are actually eating. The zebras are not feeding off this long grass that you see here. They are actually feeding off that base layer that is still quite green after the recent rain, but it should theoretically be a little bit greener than what it is now, although we are almost in June, and once we hit June, that's sort of winter for us, and so the brown should be sort of coming through slowly but surely. Right, so James Henry has been busy and has found one of the large animals that has been really a dominating species over the last few drives. So let's go across to James, who's little with his big animal.
It is absolutely the dominating species in the last few drives, and there are 2 little elephants in a very large herd of elephants here in the far eastern corners of Djuma, and I suspect very strongly that this is probably part of the same group that Tristan spent his 3-hour solo on yesterday afternoon, just near the Chitwa Dam. Now what I'm going to try and do is just ease a little bit forward. We are kind of in the middle of them, and I just want to try and show you the extent of the herd. I just want to go a little bit next to this chap here. Down the road there we've got a whole number. Looks like a what is it? Looks like a cow and a couple of youngsters there. And again, probably a slightly, small group of the larger herd, still be led by a little matriarch or I don't mean a little matriarch, I mean by a matriarch who runs that small section. 2 young bulls in front of us here, disinterested in anything we have to say, which is very nice. I always like it when elephants are disinterested in anything I have to say. And then I think probably a number of small matriarchal groups that make up the whole herd. I don't know what this cow to the left of us is doing. I think she's either playing with those 2 little ones or she's digging. Her ears are way out. This is very special. Oh, look at them all. She's digging. She's now digging a hole with her tusk. Sorry, my dear, I didn't mean to give you a fright. There's a little one now in the middle of the road. It's very difficult to know where to look. Who's being charged and chased by others. I wonder if elephants knew how funny they looked when they run, if they would ever run. This is just great, and everything completely calm as they feed. Now, Atlas, you're wondering how big a herd of elephants can get. Well, in this area, you know, a group like this is unusually large. The average size herd of elephants in the Kruger region is probably about 10 to 15 animals, often smaller than that. But over the last few days, in fact, for the last week or so, we've been seeing these, what can only be described, I think, as agglomerations of small herds. And this is not unusual. Elephants do this. The herds will join up. Whether they are then led by a sort of uber matriarch or not, I'm not sure. But certainly there are a number of small groups that are moving around with each other, and we noticed that most clearly with our half-trunk herd a little while back. Now, Goku, you're wondering about the hierarchy of an elephant herd, and what I'm going to do is just see if I can't induce this car to roll slowly forward while I tell you. The hierarchy is not particularly linear, but the herd is led by the oldest and largest female normally, and she doesn't necessarily have a deputy, and so the others in the herd, there's not necessarily a linear hierarchy amongst the others in the herd. She will lead the herd, she will tell them where to go and how to move, but it's not so much a dominance hierarchy as it is a hierarchy of teaching, if you like. She's the sort of lead teacher. She will instill discipline on some youngsters, but it's not a linear hierarchy like you'd expect to find, say, in a wolf pack, or in what else has a linear hierarchy, or in a hyena clan, for example, the other matriarchal society out here. And then the bull's dominance is purely defined by their size. I'm just going to roll slowly down the road here with them. John, there's a really interesting question from you, and one that I can actually answer with relative, not quite experience, but certainly with relative knowledge. You say, what are the chances of a captive elephant being released into the wild successfully? Elephant herds will adopt strangers, but often they have to be quite young. And so if you were to take, say, a circus elephant and just release it into the wild, it would almost certainly not cope. They would not be able to socialize properly. They would probably be killed by larger bull elephants, perhaps. They would not be socially astute enough to integrate into a herd. If you do it with young orphaned elephants, however, so you can hand raise an elephant to a certain age and then slowly reintroduce them to the wild, and that seems to work quite well. And Tristan's actually done it before. Tristan's been part of projects that have done that sort of thing, so he'll be able to give you a really nice idea of how possible it is. I just want to quickly tell you, while we look at this elephant throwing sand on itself, that I did a little bit of research, James, onto the squirrels. And interestingly, I know this has got nothing to do with the sighting, but it's still quite interesting. The squirrel group, which can consist of a sort of fairly random number of individuals, is territorial, but it's largely defended by the male, except for the actual anal pasting part of it, which is largely done by the females. But the males in the group will aggressively defend their territories. So there you are. And to the right-hand side there, Ferg, we've got a young bull breaking off some tree. It looks like a bit of combretum. Joe, you're wondering how much the average size, or how much the average sized bull will eat during the course of a day. No one knows for 100% sure, because most of the figures that I've read, I think, are extrapolated from a 10-year-old cow, and she ate 150 kilograms of food a day. So if you extrapolate from that, you'll find a big bull will eat probably about 300 kilograms, 660 pounds or so of food in a day. Now, we're going to sit with this herd for a bit longer. While we do that, Jamie apparently has got either some elephants or a question about elephants or something like that on her feet.
I do. I have some questions about elephants. I actually have a question that I'm going to pose to all of you. And it's a tracking question in a way, but it's a mystery more than anything else. And when I was a kid at school, the teacher always used to say, put on your thinking caps. This particular mystery requires some thinking, and I think for our regular viewers it should be relatively easy, but it just requires some out-of-the-box thinking. I want to know, and don't tell me it was elephants, because we know it's elephants. Of course it's elephants. The question is, what did the elephant do? Because if you look at this, look over here. Look at the grass all the way up here in this tree. There's grass up here. There's grass all over it, from the top to the bottom. And of course, you can see quite clearly this is a big dead knobthorn, so the elephant wasn't after the knobthorn at all. Not in the slightest. I was obviously eating grass, because there's grass there. And now look here. Look at this flattened patch over here. Obviously the elephants were standing here. You can see some of their tracks. What did this elephant do? What happened here? What did this elephant do that created this image that's in front of us? A massive dead knobthorn. And what it is, the reason I'm asking you this, and I'm going to ask you to send the questions or your answers through, or your questions, I suppose, as well. Did you find a stick there, Sam? Lots of thorns on it. Yes, that's the danger of walking backwards. Absolutely. So send your answers through to #SafariLive on Twitter, because the answer to this is intimately connected to the way in which elephants and this ecosystem interact with each other. There's a whole lot of information in this one area, the flattened grass, the grass in the tree itself. It's a dead tree, so it's not after chewing on dead bark. No elephant wants to do that. There's a mystery here, and while you sort of think about that, we can have a look at a relatively obvious answer to one of the questions. No, relatively obvious answer to what happened here. This is slightly different. This was a living knobthorn tree, It's now a dead knobthorn tree, and you can see the main stem has been completely broken. Just think about the strength required to do this. This is a knobthorn tree. The wood is unbelievably hard, almost as hard as leadwood. So this is a really very solid tree. And this elephant probably did this without any particular effort involved at all. A couple of knocks with its head, and over went the knobthorn, getting across to the fresh leaves, and we're seeing it more and more now as we go into the dry season. I'm just trying to see something. I want to show you how tough this wood is. You can see how thin, oh, this is slippery. See how thin that bit of bark holding it back on is? How thin the stem is? Look, I'm not the heaviest weight in the world. That I will confess, but this is completely solid and stable. There's no way my great weight is going to snap it. Mind you, I could probably balance on a toothpick if I wanted to. But it really is very, very strong wood. Now, the elephants, now after the leaves of the trees, and apparently this particular elephant, or this herd of elephant, at some point got tired. This is for me one of the most amusing parts. It got tired of the mouthful of grass that it had, and just kind of dumped it. Let me move my shadow out of the way. It almost looks like a piece of thatch. The elephant had its mouthful of grass, and then obviously the tree went over, and the elephant decided, actually, you know what? I'd quite like to eat some knobthorn leaves instead. And they've got to, this particular tree, this knobthorn tree, is going to be one of the sort of, not the saving graces of the animals at the end of the dry season. No, actually, probably that's a good way of putting it, because knobthorns are one of the first trees to get their green leaves in spring. So around about October, when everything else is dry, dusty, dirty, the knobthorns flower, and they get their brand new green leaves. And that for the animals is a wonderful thing. And elephants serve a very important ecological role, because they actually push the knobthorns over, and that allows the other browsers access to the fresh leaves as well, once the elephants are done feeding. So it's all part and parcel of the way in which elephants interact with the ecosystem. So Chantal, have we got any answers to our mystery over there? So our Laura Moore is on to us. I'm fine. Nobody saw anything. Nobody saw that? That didn't happen. It's because I laughed at you earlier, Seb. Our Laura Moore says it was a tipping contest. You know what? You're not wrong. It was about tipping. This tree was here. This is where this tree was. And what has happened is that this tree was knocked over sometime last year, and it created this beautiful seed bank, a protected area where the grasses, the other grasses, are starting to sort of go grey and brown. But here, where this tree was, it's a beautiful, fresh, green, protected place where it can grow without being harassed by any of the grazers. The elephants know this, and they wait until the grass is nice and fresh and green and grown. And then what the elephant would have done is come and dragged the tree, and because it's a knobthorn tree, it's got these vicious thorns. The thorns hooked all of the grass, the dead bits of grass, some of the living grass as well, hooked it and ripped it out of the ground as the elephant rolled this tree over. Now, I have to tell you that the feat of strength that elephants show, I mean, imagine how heavy this was, and it was attached to the grasses, and actually it was still partially attached at the bottom here, at the base. They ripped it out completely and flipped it. So what they've done is they've fed off the seed bank now that had resulted in the fresh green grass, and all they've done is just moved it to the next place. And so for next year, underneath this dead knobthorn, there will be a whole host of fresh green grass underneath here for the next year. How cool is that? It's almost farming in a way. Not quite, but it is. It's the way that the elephants have or live in symbiosis with the ecosystem and the land around them. So well done, Lara Moore. I'm sorry, I keep tripping over your name. I do it every time I hear it. It's just something that makes me, that I confuse the Lara and the R and the Moore. Flipped over, and there you go. And I didn't get this immediately when I looked at this. It was Herbie who pointed it out to me immediately as to what had actually happened. I was picturing an elephant standing here going like this, with grass, and just chucking it up into the top of the tree. But that's not what happened at all. Anyway, there you go. Mystery solved and answers given. Very well done. I'm going to move on now and carry on. Hey, leave me alone. It's so funny when you go walking with people who don't know the bush and they don't know trees, and you'll walk straight into a tree to avoid a small looking bush, and they all sort of look at you like you're crazy, and they take the straight and obvious line, and then they find out exactly why it was that you ducked around the tree. It was so as to avoid being hooked on the tiny little baby knobthorn that's sitting waiting for you. So I always advise anybody who comes walking with me, never, first of all, walk with untied shoes, and secondly, follow where we walk, because it's a very good idea. Oh, we are bumbling about on foot. Tristan's bumbling about in the vehicle. Let's see where he is.
Oh, yes, we are bumbling about on Arathusa, and it is a dead zone at this stage. There is nothing really going on. We left our zebras and carried on, and it's still very quiet. We haven't seen anything, haven't got any tracks even. We know that the Nkuhumas are in Simbambili, which is the only update that we've gotten, and they were sitting around in that area. They're digesting a buffalo that they managed to kill yesterday morning, apparently. So that is where they are. Birmingham's wise, no updates from them. I did get an update as well that there was, I forgot about this, that there was tracks for Shadow and a cub together. So for those of you that were wondering about whether Shadow's cub is still alive or whether she's doing okay, it seems that she is with the cub still. They haven't found her, but they have got tracks for her, which is good news. Now I'm just heading up towards Mtunduluka Pan, where there is a dead tree that is on the edge of the pan, and it's a tree that seems to be squirrel heaven, because the other day when we came there were squirrels all over it. So I want to just see if our squirrel family are still here, but it appears that they are not here this morning. I'm surprised because it is quite cold this morning, so I would have thought that they would have been out on the tree. And it's this tree here on our left hand side, which is the one that the squirrels are using, and I've seen them there probably 3-4 times on that particular tree, and there's 5 of them that live there. But I don't see any today. Maybe something has spooked them and they've gone inside of the hole. You can actually see the hole is a little bit down from there. There it is, yep. And so that's where they go in and out from. And there's a nice big family that normally lives there. Like I say, sometimes you'll find if maybe a monitor lizard has come through, or there's been a bird of prey, that they just take refuge. So alas, not even the squirrels are out this afternoon, or this morning, on Arathusa. All very, very quiet indeed, which is not ideal. But I'm glad at least James has got some elephants, and that's been the story of the last few drives, is elephants. So hopefully something will change and our luck will change, and we'll find something spotty, or at least with sharp teeth and claws. So talking about our elephants and the fact that James has at least got elephants, let's go across to him so you can see something rather than just me driving around.
Yes, we are, I think, with the same elephants that Tristan had yesterday, as I said to you, and these are 2 young bulls having a little bit of a boxing match. Not sure why they decided today is a good day, but as I was saying a little bit earlier, they've been eating, of course, since the very early hours of this morning, and it must be very, very boring eating spinach from 4 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock in the morning. I imagine I would be deeply bored of eating spinach by now. Wouldn't you, Fergus?
Yeah. Unless I did turn into Popeye.
Unless you turned into Popeye, yes. I suppose that is a good point. One mustn't forget the Popeye effect of spinach.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly that's the only reason I used to eat it when I was young. It's probably